morning, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Professor or Dr. Adrian Saville to the floor today to talk about unlocking real estate potential in a coalition economy. Adrian has been a guest speaker with us previously. We hosted him on the 23rd of April 2023 when he spoke about mapping markets and economic context. Adrian, for you that don't know, and I'm sure most of you are very familiar with Adrian's bona fides, is currently Professor for Economics, Finance and Strategy at Gordon Institute of Business Sciences, GIBS. Following his academic prowess, he also enjoys a visiting professorship for strategic management at the Rotman School of Management in Ontario, Canada. Alongside his academic accolades, Adrian has enjoyed significant success in business, having formed and built and grown an advisory firm over 25 years and sold that in 2017 to a listed fund, one of our big blue chips. From 2017, Adrian has also chaired the investment committee of Meta Capital, a venture capital fund. More recently, now in 2023, Adrian has formed a company called Boundless World, strategic advisory firm, focused on capital markets, business model optimization, and growth strategy. And as early as just 2 days ago, was hosted by the Civitas Network, where he spoke about building growth businesses in a very tough economic climate, economic conditions. So he's been very, very busy. I did say to Adrian, I asked him what he had done in this last year since I last hosted him here in April. And Adrian is a funny guy. Adrian's a funny guy and he's got great wit. So he sent me a response and I said, can I just read it, paraphrase it straight? Because I thought it was a great response. Sort of sets a tone for today. And he said, Greg, what can I say that is new or different? Since we last met, I've been to Eswatini, Mauritius, Malawi, Brazil, Canada, United States, and Argentina. I'm a year older, 1 vote richer, a tax year poorer. He says, I don't know, I'm trying to be clever, but I'll do the economics and you can do the dad jokes. But I must say, Adrian, when he was last here, had a great balance of intellect, information share, and his humor, the dad jokes. So I'm not going to take that away from you, Adrian. I'm going to give you the podium and allow you to give us that balance. So great, warm welcome to Adrian.
Geoff, Greg, High Street Auction, thank you for the invitation to be here. It does feel a little surreal that it was roughly a year ago, going into winter, that I was invited to talk about the economic backdrop, what it meant for business and decision-making. And I'm going to do something very unusual for an economist. I'm not going to depress you. I've got some good news. And it's not made up, it's real. Here's the spoiler alert. Where I want to finish up is by telling you some remarkably good news about the South African economy. And so let's try this on for size. The first is that fair value for the rand under a coalition or national unity government is closer to 15 rand to the dollar than 25 rand to the dollar. The second is that we are on the crest of the interest rate wave, and that you can start to anticipate rate cuts from here with moderating inflation. So there's a double whammy. And then to add, not some sugar sprinkling on top, but I actually think a fundamental foundation. I'm not quite sure what the day is. Someone can shout at me what day we're on. But it's somewhere around day 93 of uninterrupted energy supply. Someone's got the number? 90-something. And I bump into a woman I've done work with over a number of years. She'll be well known to many of you. Her name is Busi Mavuso. She is the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa. And I asked Busi because if you know her, she speaks only one thing, and that is the absolute truth, with a razor-sharp tongue and a mind like a whip. And I said to her, can you tell me, this was just pre-election, let's call it the 22nd of May for the sake of a date. And I asked her, is this diesel that is keeping the lights on to try and sucker punch us as voters and seduce us into the belief that everything is fixed? Is it diesel, or has the partnership between the public and private sector eventually started to manifest? And she says to me she suspects that it is 80-20 real fixes. 80 real fixes, 20 diesel. And that is profoundly good news, which I've actually got used, we've got so used to these terms resilience, that it's quite hard to tell South Africans good news. Like there's disbelief. This guy can't be speaking the truth. And not only are we now on the receiving end of these critical fixes to one of the most important network industries, that we're also starting to see it creep into business performance, which will creep into economic performance. And I wouldn't be surprised as we go through the year, with this being sustained, that we land up producing some of the strongest economic performance that we've seen in a decade. Now that is, I think, a valuable backdrop against which we can have a discussion about this. The government of national unity. And wow, what a mess. This is like trying to, so why do coalition governments work so badly? And we can, we're not going to fuss here about the difference between national unity and coalition. That's in the nature of the arrangement. We'll leave that for the lawyers to sort out. But a coalition or unity government is essentially trying to get people with different backgrounds, disparate views, to agree on the way forward. And that this sets you up for trouble. It's a bit like trying to arrange a long weekend with your wife, your mistress, your girlfriend, your ex-wife. I better throw in some other genders, otherwise I'm going to get your stepson and your father-in-law. It's going to be a mess. And if we look around the world for the way in which governments of unity and coalition perform, it's almost invariably incoherent, it's noisy, it's difficult to make sense out of it because it is hard for them to make tough decisions. You're always trying to please, a plethora of different interests. Here's something that I think has been lost on many people living in this country for the last 30 years. We've actually been in a condition of government of unity or coalition for the last 30 years. The African National Congress that has led this country has done it not as a single party. They have done this as a coalition government made up of the amalgam of COSATU, the Women's Movement, Youth League, SACP, and then the conservative middle-class ANC party. We've had coalition government for 30 years. That's quite cool. So this thing that is supposed to meet us with shock and awe, we actually are very well equipped to deal with. And you've got a good sense of just how hard it is for unity governments to make decisions because that's our lived experience. And the frustration in that lived experience is that South Africa disappoints, that we speak bigger than we deliver. Bit like Portugal last night. If you watched the football, man, I had money down on the obvious winner, and that didn't go so well. Georgia comes out of nowhere. But, so South Africa has done a Portugal on us in terms of economic performance. Our per-person income has fallen below the middle income average. Our share of world exports has sagged. We've been overtaken by look, impressive performance by countries like Vietnam, but wow, we should have been able to at least keep up with. So living with political confusion and economic disappointment, I actually think is the order of the day in this country. And as much as that sounds like it's defeatist, there is nothing more dangerous than a naive optimist. So let's work with what we've got. And working with what we've got, here's some evidence of just how far we've fallen behind in terms of economic growth. South Africa versus some comparators, the superstar over the last decade, the likes of India, China, Indonesia, Taiwan, they sit on the far left-hand side of this chart. On the right-hand side, South Africa. In academia, it's sort of impolite to quote yourself. It's considered like a little arrogant to quote yourself. So I'm taking off my academic hat. I'm not a professor here. I'm just a social media commentator. And so I'm popping up here a tweet that I made a couple of weeks ago. And I had to share this data because it really surprised me. I made this tweet a couple of days before the election. And for the younger people in the audience, a tweet is like it's a social media platform. It's like Instagram, but earlier. And we use words, not pictures. And for the Facebook people, this is what happens after Facebook. Okay. So just try this on for size. Cyril Ramaphosa comes to power in 2017, and he was supposed to be the big rejuvenator. He was going to bring us a fantastic new dawn. And that was CR17. And this is the amazing stat. Under Cyril Ramaphosa, we've had economic growth of 0.3% per annum. I had to reread that number and double check it, keeping in mind that population growth is 1.5%. That means under Ramaphosa, we have steadily gone backwards on a per-person basis. That is a bad result in anyone's language. Now, that led me to sort of a head-scratching. Well, I wonder what we did under Jay-Z. Under Zuma, we did 1.9% per annum. Wow. Bring him back. Okay, I didn't write that. But, you can see the tweet. That's what I popped up. Well, within moments, there's quite a few people who follow me on Twitter, and within moments, I was on the headmaster's carpet, and I was being accused of being a DA supporter. It's like, here you go, DA supporter. It took social media a little while to work out that I'm from Durban originally. So Greg and I come from the same place to start, and I'm from Durban originally, and by Saturday afternoon, they had firmly convinced themselves that I was actually part of MK. How cool is that, hey? Well, whether it's 1.9 or 0.3, it's not enough, and it is a long way from the promises. This shows you the distance between government policy promises, that's the light blue column, and their actual delivery, that's the dark blue column. And the distance has got wider and wider. So often when we think about our own countries, like when we think about our own relationships, if my significant other says to me, we need to talk, it's like, yo, this is going to be tough. It's going to be a long weekend. And the moment you hear those words, we need to talk, I go into my lizard brain defense mode. What am I in trouble for? What time was I home? Who was I speaking to? Did I really say that? What was I supposed to plan, arrange? And that defensive, no one's chuckling, so clearly that isn't funny. But, that defense just doesn't equip you because you lose perspective. And when you lose perspective, you come bad at being objective and taking informed decisions. I would venture that immersed so deep into economic frustration, we have lost our perspective and we've lost the ability to take sensible, informed decisions. So let me go further to the end of my argument to you this afternoon, that if you are considering the purchasing power of your currency, generally when we speak to investors, they think that the best place to allocate capital is not South Africa. It can be anywhere except South Africa. But when we adjust the purchasing power of the rand against any major currency and against other emerging market currencies, there is almost no place you get better bang for your buck than in South Africa. So Greg makes reference to the fact that I've got a visiting professorship in Toronto. I went house hunting in Toronto. Stop, would be the advice to myself. For 200 square meters, that includes the basement, single garage, a tiny garden, no swimming pool, one veranda on your third story. Remember, story 1 is the basement, hey? Story 2 and story 3. It's going to cost you about 30 million bucks, 30 million rand, 2 million Canadian dollars. The purchasing power that you get for your rand is absolutely staggering. And when you do that type of comparison, notwithstanding these disappointing economic numbers, you get a real sense of the quality of life and what you can do with your balance sheet and that capital. So here's, our government of national unity on its way. They're still wrestling over how many ministers we have, what their names will be, which parties they will come from. And we're going to see loads more of this over the next 5 years. That is the very nature of coalition. It's incoherent, it's noisy. Zapiro is just really sharp at sort of capturing the essence of a story with the stroke of a pen. So, what does coalition mean? In one breath, nothing new. However, there is a little, it would be, I think, very naive if I say nothing is different here. Let's move on. There is a tiny bit different, and that is the coalition has become more fragmented than over the last 30 years, because now not only do you have to take your wife, your ex-wife, your girlfriend, your mistress, but you've got the DA and EFF and MK as hangers on, trying to come to some type of sensible arrangement. If we look for coalition governments that have really worked well, we can find some examples. Germany is a good example. The great however is, however, that's the exception, it's not the rule. So more noise. But we are not alone, because there's been a number of other governments that have gone to the polls this year. And what has been striking in looking at these at the results of this big election year is there are more surprises than outcomes that we had widely anticipated. So amongst other things, just to talk to a couple of these pictures, on the left-hand side, Claudia Sheinbaum is elected in Mexico a few weeks back to head up that country, first female head of state in Mexico. The Mexican peso revolted and went from 17 to the dollar to 19 to the dollar. So the Mexican voters wanted this, capital markets didn't. In the middle, we've got Modi. Now, the Indian economy has been romping along handsomely under Modi's rule for the last decade, packing down 7% economic growth. It was widely anticipated that Modi would win the election in a landslide. He got 40% of the vote, and he must form a coalition government. On the right-hand side, we've got Keir Starmer, who's going to take... I've got two references. One is to Keir Starmer, and the other is to Macron. Keir Starmer is going to take over in the UK. It's anticipated that Labour will win, but not with a majority in the UK. So the UK government, new Labour government, will have to form a coalition. And the same thing in France. Marine Le Pen, Macron called a snap election, and the French stock market revolted, selling French banks down by 10% on the day. And Marine Le Pen has come in as the strong contender. And so it looks like in Macron's infinite wisdom of calling a snap election, he's actually going to cause his opposition to get the majority, but not be able to form a majority government. And this is wow, 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 wow. Nothing unusual then to see in South Africa. Let's move on. But one big final political surprise to come for the year, or not surprise, but upset for the year, and that is buckle in for Trump 2. He's on his way. Trump 2 is on his way. And there's lots of other things to throw into, the bucket of noise. NHI, amazing how quickly we've gone quiet on NHI. We've forgotten about that. Lots of hand-wringing because that was signed in just before the election. NHI isn't coming to force anytime soon. That all of the preconditions for NHI to happen are so extreme and so specific that as much as we want national health coverage, that national health coverage is an impossible mission as things stand. We've got the goings-on in Gaza, Israel. Under Trump 2, it's likely that Ukraine gets put under even more pressure as Trump pulls Putin closer, and he will push China further, and so on and so on. So there is no shortage of things to worry about. What I want to focus us on in the last couple of minutes is, so where does the opportunity sit inside of this? For the last 15 years or so, I've been involved in building an economic model that helps explain, understand country performance. This is called the six-factor model. Fantastically, just 6 things really explain country prospect. And when we put these 6 ingredients together, this is the result of studying 160 countries' performance over 60 years. When we put these 6 ingredients together, we can find the prospects for countries around the world. This is a very, very noisy chart. I'll focus your eyes on that red spot. That's world economic growth. You might be quickly searching for countries of interest, clustered just down below and to the left of the red spot. You will find South Africa, and we are hanging out with Brazil, Argentina, Ukraine, Russia, Mauritius. This is not a bad batch of people to hang out with. It's not top of the A class. Top of the A class is India, Ethiopia, Tanzania. They're going to pack down 5% economic growth over the next 10 years. But South Africa, pretty much more of the same, a muddling through economy. And Greg also made reference to the fact that I've been in Argentina, and if you put a gun to my head, which has happened in South Africa, if you put a gun to my head, I would choose Argentina as a fantastic place to go and live. Buenos Aires is recently ranked one of the most livable cities in Latin America, and who compares to that livable city? Cape Town and Johannesburg. So that's the perspective, that getting out of our own drama, I hope, helps to bring. Does this work? Do you see the dress in 2 ways? Show of hands if you can see white and gold. Show of hands if you see blue and black. Fantastic. Okay. So, now my picture's gone again. Oh, no, it's there still. This is gorgeous that people are looking at the exact same picture, and no matter how many times you show me this, I am absolutely convinced that this dress is white and gold. And you can tell the black and blue is that this is white and gold. They simply don't believe you. And I think finding opportunity in looking at that dress and looking at this country is being able to see the same thing with those 2 perspectives, that there is incredible prospect in this country. The bond market has started pricing South African risk better. Our 30-year interest rates are 1% stronger than 6 months ago. That the purchasing power of the rand, I've already referenced this on the right-hand side. This shows you the rand as one of the most compellingly priced currencies around the world. If you lived on Mars and you were going to try and buy assets anywhere in the world with your Martian metical, that's their currency, they don't get the dollar. With your Martian metical, where would you find the biggest bang for your buck? You would find it in places like South Africa, Argentina, Turkey. That's where you go hunting with scarce capital. If you go hunting with the pack, then you're going to go hunting in the United States and you'll go and buy businesses like NVIDIA. But there is a huge difference between a great business and a great investment, and it is the price that you pay. And this much-loved company, NVIDIA, which now has a market value which is worth more than all of China. Try that on for size, eh? One US company, NVIDIA, is being valued by investors as worth more than all of China. Something's wrong here. That just doesn't make sense. And it's being priced on 23 times earnings. 23 times sales. I would say the same thing about my Canadian garage. It is stupidly priced. It doesn't translate into a good investment when you buy a great asset at a bad price. And here you have in front of you, with this event this afternoon, high street auctions, great assets. Well, the hammer hasn't fallen, so I'm not sure about the price, but, great assets at potentially great prices. It's up to you to figure out the prices. Here's my colleague Busi Mavuso, and she helps me close out the reference that notwithstanding the challenges, the structural constraints that South Africa has, electricity is on day 90-something, and that leads me to venture that economic growth this year will surprise on the upside, inflation will surprise on the downside, interest rates will start to ease sometime around September, and they will be helped by a raft of interest rate cuts that the Fed still has to make. It was anticipated at the start of this year that the Fed would cut interest rates 6 times. So far, no cuts, which means the barrel is really loaded in our favor if we are interest rate sensitive. And then a couple of other things that we can add into that barrel. The fact that South Africa is abundant in photovoltaic irradiation, public-private partnerships will increasingly switch South Africa to inexpensive, private-supplied, reliable, secure alternative energy. Our neighborhood is the second fastest-growing region in the world. India and China are not the fastest-growing economies over the last 20 years. It's Rwanda and Ethiopia. Sub-Saharan Africa is the second fastest-growing region in the world. We have the most sophisticated or complex economy in that region. Commodity prices continue to support the South African economy. We need Transnet to help us get from pit to port. Transnet is now being addressed by the same public-private partnership that has helped us fix Eskom. And then if I go to the place where I spend a lot of time, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, there is this raft of capital available where you can find companies trading on single-digit price earnings multiples and elevated dividend yields. Peter Lynch says when you find a company on a dividend yield higher than the price earnings multiple, buy as much of it as you can. And there is, on the JSE, examples of this, including listed property companies, listed industrial companies, and I've made some references to those businesses here. So I hope that gives you some perspective. I hope it gives you food for thought. And having filled an auction room, I hope it gives you cause for action. Thank you for your time.